Before we can speak of how our ancient ancestors slept, we must first try to comprehend the world in which they closed their eyes. We must try to imagine a world without a single source of artificial light. This is a task that requires a true leap of the imagination, because our world and our senses are saturated with light. We are bathed in it from the moment we wake to the moment we try to force ourselves to sleep. But our ancestors lived in a world where light was a precious, fleeting gift, given only by the sun. When that gift was withdrawn each evening, the world transformed into a place we would find utterly alien. Let your mind drift and paint a picture. Imagine yourself standing on a gentle hill in the savannas of East Africa, perhaps 200,000 years ago. The sun has been a constant, powerful presence all day, a blazing, white-hot circle in a vast blue sky. Now, as it begins its descent, its character changes. The harsh, direct light softens. The colors of the world deepen. The greens of the acacia trees become richer. The pale gold of the dry grass becomes warmer. The sun itself turns from white to a brilliant, molten gold. When it touches the horizon, it seems to flatten and spread, painting the underside of the few scattered clouds in spectacular shades of fiery orange, deep rose, and royal purple. This is the great, silent spectacle that ended every single day of their lives. It was their television, their cinema, their art gallery, a daily masterpiece of impossible beauty. You watch as the last sliver of the sun's brilliant arc disappears below the distant line of the earth. And in that moment, a switch is thrown. The vibrant, warm world of the day begins to dissolve. A coolness rises from the earth, a tangible feeling on your skin, carrying the scent of dust and dry grass. The air itself seems to become stiller, heavier. The symphony of the day, the calls of birds, the hum of insects, fades to a respectful silence. It is a pause, a moment of transition. Then a new symphony begins, quieter, more subtle. The first tentative chirps of crickets, a sound that will soon swell into a steady, hypnotic, and all-encompassing chorus. You might hear the gentle, whispering sigh of the wind as it moves through the tall grass, a sound like a slow exhalation. Far, far away, you might hear the low hoot of an owl or the sharp bark of a jackal. These are the sounds of the other world, the world of the night. And then the darkness arrives. It does not simply get dark. The darkness is a presence. It rises from the ground like a slow, silent tide of black ink, covering everything. It is a darkness of a quality and depth that we have entirely lost. A profound, absolute, and almost tangible blackness. It is not the absence of light, it is the presence of darkness. It is so complete that it seems to swallow sound. It blurs all the edges of the world, making a familiar rocky outcrop just a few feet away seem like a monstrous, looming shape. The distinction between the land and the sky so clear during the day, now becomes uncertain. But you are a creature of this world. Your eyes, never damaged by the harsh, constant glare of artificial lights, are far more sensitive than ours. As they slowly adapt, the world begins to re-emerge in shades of silver and gray. And then you look up, and the sight would steal your breath away. The sky is not a black void with a few lonely stars. It is a celestial ocean, a dome of pure, blazing, and overwhelming brilliance. The stars are not faint, twinkling dots. They are intense points of light, silver, blue, gold, so numerous and so bright that they seem to be layered, creating a sense of infinite depth. The Milky Way, our home galaxy, is not a feature you have to search for. It is the dominant feature of the sky, a vast, luminous river of light, a celestial cloud so dense with stars that it looks like a brushstroke of divine paint. It stretches from one horizon to the other, a great, shimmering backbone for the cosmos. Within this shimmering river, you can see dark patches, cosmic dust clouds, which our ancestors saw as the shapes of great celestial animals, the heroes and villains of their mythologies. The constellations we recognize would be there, but they would not be the simple connect-the-dots pictures we see in books. They would be brilliant, obvious figures, embedded within a field of thousands of other stars of equal brightness. It would be impossible not to feel a sense of profound awe, to feel that you were looking into the very heart of creation. The moon, in its stately, predictable cycle, would be the great governor of the night. On the nights of the full moon, it would rise like a second, gentler sun, bathing the entire landscape in a cool, ethereal silver light. This light would be strong enough to cast sharp, distinct shadows. These would be nights of relative safety, of movement, perhaps even of celebration and ritual. But on the nights of the new moon, the true, deep, primal darkness would return. A time for staying close to the clan, a time for caution, a time when the veil between the known world and the world of spirits felt very, very thin. In this world, sleep was not a negotiation. It was not a task to be completed or a problem to be solved. It was a natural, inevitable surrender. The body's internal clock, our circadian rhythm, was perfectly and unbreakably tethered to this great planetary rhythm of light and dark. The fading light itself was the most powerful sleeping pill imaginable. As the sunlight vanished, the eyes would send a signal to a tiny but powerful part of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This master clock, the conductor of our internal orchestra, would then send out its command. It is time to produce melatonin. And this hormone, the hormone of darkness, would begin to circulate through the body, gently lowering its core temperature, slowing the metabolism, and creating a powerful, pervasive, and deeply pleasant feeling of drowsiness. It was an invitation to rest issued by the planet itself. There was no reason to fight it. The day's work was done. The world had gone quiet. All that was left to do was to follow its lead. This was the womb in which our relationship with sleep was formed. A deep, profound darkness, a sky of overwhelming beauty, and a silence that allowed you to hear your beating of your own heart. Into this immense and overwhelming darkness, a darkness populated by unseen dangers and ancestral fears, our earliest relatives brought forth their own personal star, a small, tamed piece of the sun brought down to earth. The fire. It is truly impossible to overstate the importance of the campfire in the story of human consciousness, and, consequently, in the history of sleep. The control of fire was not merely a technological advancement, it was a profound psychological revolution. It fundamentally reshaped our ancestors' relationship with the night, transforming it from a time of pure, terrifying vulnerability into a time of communal safety and shared consciousness. Let us return to that small clan on the savannah, as the last light of dusk surrenders to the absolute blackness of the primal night. They do not scatter into the darkness. Instead, they converge. They move towards a single point of light, a flickering, dancing heart of orange and yellow. This is the campfire, carefully built and tended in a prepared fire pit at the mouth of a cave or in the center of a simple, man-made shelter. This fire creates what can only be described as a bubble of reality, a small, warm, and illuminated world carved directly out of the vast, cold, and indifferent emptiness of the night. Outside this circle of light is the unknown, the realm of the predator, the domain of spirits. But inside this circle is everything that matters: safety, warmth, family, and story. The light cast by the fire was alive. Unlike the steady, dead light of a modern light bulb, the firelight was constantly moving, shifting, and changing. It leaped and danced, casting long, fluid shadows that moved with a life of their own. These shadows would flicker across the rough walls of the cave, turning them into a natural cinema screen. The faces of the people gathered around the fire would be illuminated in a warm orange glow, their features softened, their eyes reflecting the dancing flames. This constant, gentle motion of light and shadow was hypnotic, a natural visual lullaby that would have helped to soothe the mind and prepare it for rest. It was in this flickering light that stories were told, the sacred myths and histories of the tribe passed down through generations. The dancing shadows themselves would become the characters in these tales: the great mammoth, the cunning lion, the trickster spirit. The fire was the stage upon which their culture was enacted. The sound of the fire was a complex and deeply reassuring symphony, a constant companion through the long hours of darkness. It was a soundscape rich with detail. There was the sharp, high-pitched crackle of dry twigs and leaves as they first caught fire. There was the deeper, more resonant crack of a larger, seasoned log splitting in the heat. There was the soft, persistent hiss of moisture and sap boiling out of greener wood,
a sound like a gentle exhalation. And beneath it all, there was the low, steady, almost imperceptible hum of the bed of glowing red embers, the heart of the fire, a sound that was felt as much as it was heard. Occasionally, a pocket of air trapped within a log would expand and burst with a loud, surprising pop, a brief percussive beat in the night's quiet rhythm. This collection of sounds, so organic and varied, became deeply ingrained in the human psyche as the ultimate sound of safety. It was a signal to the most ancient parts of our brain that a guardian was on watch, that the cold and the predators were being held at bay. The smell of the fire was another powerful primitive anchor. The specific scent of burning wood, the sharp, resinous perfume of pine, the rich, earthy aroma of oak, the sweet fragrance of acacia, was the perfume of home. This wood smoke would have permeated everything, clinging to their animal hide clothing, their hair, and the very walls of their shelter. This smell was not just a pleasant byproduct, it was an active deterrent. Most predator animals are instinctively wary of fire and the scent of smoke, and would have kept their distance from the campsite. It was a chemical shield, an invisible wall of scent that extended the zone of safety far beyond the circle of visible light. Within this sensory bubble, this womb of warm light, crackling sound, and smoky air, the clan would settle for the night. And this is where their sleep differed most profoundly from our own. Sleep was not a private act. It was a deeply communal, cooperative enterprise. They would huddle together for warmth and security, their bodies close, a tangle of limbs on beds of soft grass and warm furs. This physical closeness was a powerful source of comfort and a key part of a remarkable survival strategy that scientists now refer to as sentinel sleep. The group did not collectively descend into 8 hours of deep, oblivious unconsciousness. To do so would have been to invite disaster. Instead, they slept as a single, vigilant organism, sharing the burden of awareness throughout the night. This was not a conscious decision or a roster of duties. It was a biological and instinctive process. Throughout the night, it was a statistical certainty that at any given moment, at least 1 or 2 members of the group would be in a lighter stage of sleep or even momentarily awake, acting as the clan's eyes and ears. Different members of the group would naturally assume this role at different times. An elder, whose sleep patterns have naturally become more fragmented with age, would be a key sentinel. They might doze lightly for an hour, then stir, their senses alert. They would listen to the night symphony, note the rhythm of the crickets, scan the darkness beyond the fire's glow, and perhaps notice that the moon had risen higher in the sky. Feeling that all was well, they would effortlessly drift back into a light sleep. A mother with a newborn infant would be another natural sentinel. Her brain would be exquisitely tuned to the specific frequency of her baby's cry, and she would exist in a state of heightened, semi-conscious awareness all night, a state modern parents know all too well. Even the deep sleepers, the young and strong hunters, would cycle through different sleep stages. During their periods of rapid eye movement or REM sleep, Their brains would be highly active, and they would be more sensitive to unusual or unexpected sounds. The snap of a twig that doesn't belong to the fire, or a change in the wind's direction. If the fire itself began to burn low, the subtle drop in ambient temperature and the decrease in light would be enough to gently nudge someone from their slumber. They would rise almost in a sleepwalking state and place another log on the embers, stoking them back to life. They would then lie back down and re-enter sleep with little or no memory of the action in the morning. This was the tribe's collective nervous system at work. It was a distributed consciousness, a shared vigilance that allowed for both safety and rest. The burden of staying awake was shared so that no single individual had to bear it. This is why, for many of us today, a completely silent, completely dark room can feel unsettling and can even induce anxiety. Our ancient brain, the part of us that still remembers the savannah, interprets. As our ancestors huddled together around their guardian flame, their immediate world defined by the reach of its light and warmth, another fundamental aspect of the human experience was slowly taking shape: the concept of comfort. For us, in our modern world, comfort in sleep is a vast and complex industry. It is defined by thread counts, memory foam, firmness levels, and ergonomic pillows. We pursue an ideal of soft, cloud-like support. But for our earliest relatives, the idea of comfort was something far more primal, more elemental. It was not defined by softness, but by a delicate balance of safety, warmth, coolness, and a sense of separation from the raw, untamed earth. Let us first consider the very ground they slept on. For millennia, the bed was simply the earth itself. But our ancestors were not passive in this. They were active creators of their own comfort. Inside the cave or shelter, they would choose their sleeping spots with care. They would seek out a place that was naturally dry, protected from drips of water or drafts of cold air. They would clear the area of sharp stones and roots. This act of preparing a space, of designating a specific patch of ground for rest, was the first step towards creating a bedroom. It was a declaration that this small piece of the world was to be a sanctuary for the vulnerable hours of the night. Then they began to build. The first beds were not frames of wood. They were nests woven together from the materials of the natural world. Imagine them gathering great armfuls of dry, soft grass and broad, pliable leaves. They would layer these materials on the floor of the cave, creating a thick, springy mattress. This simple act was revolutionary. It provided a crucial layer of insulation, protecting their bodies from the cold that would seep up from the deep earth during the night. It also cushioned their bodies from the hardness of the ground, preventing sores and stiffness. This bed of grass was alive with the scents of the savannah, a dry, sweet, earthy perfume that would have been a comforting and familiar smell to fall asleep to. Archaeological evidence from sites like the Border Cave in South Africa suggests that this was not just a random pile of foliage. Our ancestors were sophisticated in their approach. They would often lay down a base layer of ash from the fire. The fine, powdery ash would create a clean, dry foundation and, crucially, would act as a natural insect repellent, keeping away crawling bugs and mites. On top of this ash base, they would then layer their grasses and leaves. Even more remarkably, evidence shows they would sometimes include aromatic plants, leaves from plants we know today to have insecticidal properties. They were, in essence, creating the first herbal mattress, a bed that was not just insulating, but also clean and medicinal. When the bedding became old or soiled, they would simply burn it in the fire, an act of ritual cleansing, and then gather fresh materials to build a new nest. As human societies became more settled, moving from caves to constructing the first huts and simple dwellings, the nature of the bed evolved. The sleeping area became more defined. In many early dwellings, there would be a slightly raised platform of earth or clay, a designated sleeping bench that lifted the sleepers off the cold and damp floor. On this platform, they would lay woven reed mats. These mats were a significant technological step. They were portable, durable, and could be easily cleaned. On top of these mats, they would place animal hides and furs. Imagine the sensory experience of such a bed. The rough, textured feel of the woven reeds beneath you. The surprising weight and immense warmth of a bear hide or the skins of several deer stitched together. The distinctly animal smell of the fur, a constant reminder of the world of the hunt, the world of survival. This was a bed that connected them directly to the ecosystem they were a part of. It was a comfort born of necessity and ingenuity. Now let us travel forward to the great river civilizations of Egypt and Mesopotamia. Here, as society stratified, so too did the bed. For the common farmer or laborer, the bed remained simple, a reed mat on the floor, perhaps a rough woolen blanket in the cooler months. But for the elite, the priests, the nobles, and the pharaoh, the bed became a symbol of status and a sophisticated piece of furniture. This is where we see the invention of the raised bed frame. Imagine a bed made of carved cedar wood, inlaid with ivory and gold. The frame would be elevated on legs often carved to look like the feet of powerful animals, like lions or bulls, as if the bed itself was a protective beast. This elevation was not just for show, it was immensely practical in a hot climate. It lifted the sleeper above the dusty floor and allowed cooling air to circulate underneath the bed. The mattress on this grand bed would be a thick sack of fine linen stuffed with soft materials like goose feathers, wool, or horsehair. And on their head, as we have mentioned, they would not have a soft pillow, but a meticulously carved headrest of wood, stone, or alabaster. The concept of comfort here was different. It was not just about softness. It was about coolness,
cleanliness, status, and even spiritual protection. The symbols carved in the bed frame were meant to ward off evil spirits during the vulnerable hours of sleep. The headrest, cool against the neck, provided physical relief from the heat. The entire sleeping apparatus was a carefully constructed environment designed to provide a very specific kind of elite comfort. In all of these early forms of the bed, from the simple nest of leaves to the pharaoh's gilded frame, we see a fundamental human drive. It is the drive to carve out a small, safe, and comfortable space from a world that was often harsh and unforgiving. The bed was not just a place to sleep, it was a sanctuary. It was the heart of the home, the place where children were conceived and born, the place where people recovered from illness, and the place where they would eventually die. It was a stage for the most vulnerable and profound moments of human existence. The evolution of the bed is the evolution of our desire for a safe haven. And while the materials have changed from grass and fur to latex and memory foam, the fundamental need it answers, the need for a safe, predictable, and comfortable place to let go of consciousness, remains exactly the same. It is a primal need, born in the deep darkness of the prehistoric night.